The last time I stood on Briar Lane, I was 22 years old, half a duffel bag of clothes to my name, and so certain I was running towards something that I never once looked back at what I was leaving behind. Now I'm 28, and the cab that drops me at the curb idles for exactly 3 seconds before pulling away, as if the driver can sense that this particular stretch of suburban street carries a gravity strong enough to trap a man if he stays too long. I stand on the sidewalk with my one rolling suitcase, packed light, packed with intention, packed for exactly 7 days, and I breathe in the smell of cut grass and old oak trees, and something underneath it all that is so specifically brutally home that my chest does something complicated and unwelcome. 1 week. My mother's knee surgery had been scheduled for months, and my father, God love him, is the kind of man who will burn down the kitchen trying to make toast. Someone needed to be here. My sister couldn't get away from her residency. My brother is stationed overseas. And I had no excuse that would hold water, no matter how many times I tried to build one over the phone. Aaron, my mother had said, in that particular tone of hers that skips right past asking and lands squarely in telling, "You'll come home for the week, it's settled." And so here I am, home, for exactly 7 days, with the absolute, ironclad, non-negotiable intention of keeping my head down, helping my parents, and not letting this place get its hooks back into me. I grab the handle of my suitcase and start up the front walk. That is when I notice the house next door. Not the house itself. It's the same faded blue colonial it's always been. The one that belonged to the Hartley family for as long as I can remember. But something about it is different now. There are window boxes with actual living plants in them. The porch light is on in the middle of the afternoon, a warm amber glow that seems almost intentional. And parked in the driveway is a beat-up forest green pickup truck with a crack running through the passenger side mirror and what appears to be a stack of library books visible through the rear window. Someone new lives there. I file this information away in the part of my brain labeled irrelevant and go inside to greet my mother, who is sitting in her recliner with her leg elevated and her reading glasses on, and who looks, despite everything, unreasonably pleased to see me. "You look thin," she says, by way of hello. "You look like someone who just had surgery," I reply, and bend down to kiss her cheek. She smells like lavender and the faint medicinal undertone of whatever painkillers the hospital sent her home with, and she holds my face in both hands for a moment after I straighten up, studying me with those sharp eyes that have never once missed a thing in my life. "You're tired," she says. "I'm fine. You're tired and you've been working too hard and you haven't been sleeping." She releases me, apparently satisfied with her diagnosis. "Your room is made up. Dinner's at 7. Your father is at the hardware store because he convinced himself the grab bars in my bathroom weren't installed properly, even though the home health aide installed them perfectly." Of course he did. "Oh, and the Payne boy moved in next door about 4 months ago. Andrew. He's very sweet, comes over sometimes to check on us. I told him he'd be home this week." She says this last part with a studied casualness that immediately puts me on alert. "Mom, what? What did you tell him?" "I told him you were coming home for a week, that's all." She picks up her book, which is a very obvious signal that this conversation is over on her terms. "He brings me tomatoes from his garden, real ones, not the grocery store kind." I stand there for a moment, looking at the side of her face as she pretends to read. "I'm going to put my bag upstairs," I say. "Dinner's at 7, she says again, turning a page. My childhood bedroom is exactly as I left it and also, somehow, completely different. My mother has done that thing that mothers do, where the surface remains unchanged. Same navy comforter, same desk by the window, same shelf of dog-eared paperbacks. But everything has been cleaned and straightened to a degree that makes it feel like a museum exhibit. Aaron Glover, age 18, preserved for posterity. I sit on the edge of the bed and let myself feel it for exactly 30 seconds. The particular specific ache of returning to a place that remembers a version of you that no longer exists. Then I stand up, because I am 28 years old and I do not have the luxury of unraveling on the first evening of a 7-day visit. The window above my desk looks out over the side yard, and beyond that, the driveway of the blue colonial next door. The green pickup truck is still there. I turn away from the window and unpack my suitcase. My father comes home from the hardware store at 6:15 with 3 different sizes of grab bar fasteners, a level, a tube of waterproof caulk, and the particular energy of a man who has decided that physical productivity is the only acceptable response to emotional helplessness. Aaron. He grips my shoulder the way he always has, a solid pressure that communicates approximately 4,000 things he will never say out loud. Good you're here. Good to be here, Dad. He nods, satisfied, and goes to check the bathroom measurements. We eat dinner, the 3 of us at the kitchen table, the way we always did growing up, and it is so achingly familiar that I have to focus very deliberately on the conversation. My mother's physical therapy schedule. My father's retired friends, a community garden project somewhere on the east side of town, just to keep from disappearing into the past entirely. It's after dinner, when I'm washing the dishes and my parents are settled in the living room, that I hear it. Music. Coming from next door. Not loud, not intrusive, just barely audible through the kitchen window I've cracked open against the lingering warmth of the evening. Something instrumental. Piano, maybe, layered over something else I can't quite identify. I stand at the sink with my hands in the soapy water, and I listen to it for far longer than is strictly necessary to wash 3 dinner plates. Then I turn off the water, dry my hands, and go to bed early. It's only the first day. I have 6 more to get through. That is, I tell myself, entirely manageable. I've always been an early riser. It's one of the alpha traits I've never been able to shake. The inability to stay still, to sleep past dawn. The relentless biological sense that waking before the world does, gives you some kind of advantage. It does not feel like an advantage on the second morning of my visit, when it's barely past 6 and I'm standing in my parents' kitchen in yesterday's clothes making coffee I don't yet want. Already restless in a house that feels both too familiar and too small. I take my mug outside to the back porch. The yard is quiet. The oak tree my father planted the year I was born is enormous, now big enough that its roots have started to buckle the patio stones and the morning light comes through its leaves in pieces, scattered across the grass in irregular coins of gold. I'm on my second sip when I hear the back gate of the neighboring yard open. He comes through it the way people do when they're used to being alone in the morning. No particular awareness of audience, no self-consciousness. He's carrying a watering can in one hand and what looks like a small notebook in the other, and he's wearing a faded gray t-shirt and dark sweatpants and no shoes, his feet bare against the dew-damp grass, which strikes me as the kind of choice that belongs to someone who has made a private peace with their own backyard. He hasn't seen me yet. I have approximately 2 seconds to make a decision. I can go back inside. I can be very still and hope he doesn't look over. Or I can... Morning. The word comes out of my mouth before the rest of me has agreed to it. He startles slightly, looks up, and finds me on the porch next door. For a moment, neither of us speaks. Andrew Payne is... I find myself without a ready category for what Andrew Payne is. He's around my height, maybe an inch or 2 shorter, with the kind of lean build that suggests a physical life without being aggressive about it. Brown hair that's a little too long in a way that reads as accidental rather than chosen. Eyes that are, at this distance, some indeterminate light color, green maybe or gray, the kind of eyes that probably change depending on the light. And his scent. It hits me a half second after eye contact carried on the morning air. Something warm and complex like cloves and cedar, and something underneath that I don't have a word for. Something that my alpha biology registers as omega before my conscious mind has even processed his face properly. I go very still. Morning, he says back, and his voice is unhurried, a little rough with sleep. You must be Aaron. Must be, I agree. He looks at me for a moment with an expression I can't read, not unfriendly, but assessing. Your mom talks about you a lot. She talks about everyone a lot. Something in his face shifts, and I realize it's the ghost of a smile. Fair. He tilts his head toward the garden beds along his back fence. I've got to water before it gets hot. The tomatoes are dramatic about direct sun. Right, I say. Don't let me stop you. He gives me one more look, unhurried, unworried, unworried, and then turns back to his plants. I stand on the porch and drink my coffee and absolutely do not watch him move through the garden with the patient, methodical ease of someone who genuinely loves what he's doing. I'm looking at the oak tree. I'm cataloging the buckling patio stones. I'm thinking about the grab bars in my parents' bathroom and whether my father managed to get the level right. I am definitely not noticing the way Andrew Payne tips his face up toward the early sun when he pauses between the tomato plants and the bean trellises, as if receiving something. I go inside before he finishes. My mother's first physical therapy appointment is at 10, which gives me 2 hours to do the grocery shopping she's accumulated on a list that she hands me with the satisfied expression of someone who has been waiting for a competent deputy. The grocery store is 12 minutes away. I know every aisle. My body navigates it on autopilot while my brain does something unhelpful, which is to keep returning, despite my best efforts, to the encounter in the backyard. An omega next door. An omega. My mother has been feeding information to about my return. An omega who looked at me with those light eyes and showed exactly 0 signs of the biological deference that my alpha pheromones usually produce in omegas. The slight softening, the careful warmth, the instinctive social accommodation. Andrew Payne had looked at me like I was a neighbor, moderately interesting, not particularly threatening, and then he'd turned around and watered his tomatoes. I don't know what to make of that. I load the car with 6 bags of groceries and sit in the parking lot for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel, giving myself a very direct internal lecture. 1 week, in and out. Help your parents, keep your head down. The omega next door is a person, not a complication. And you are a 28-year-old adult with a life in the city and a perfectly functional, uncomplicated existence that does not include neighborhood entanglements. Noted, I tell myself. Very mature. I start the car. My mother's physical therapist is a compact, energetic woman named Jana, who has my mother performing leg exercises with the cheerful authority of a general. And my mother, who has the pain tolerance of someone who raised 3 children and never once admitted to a headache, is gamely complying. I sit in the waiting area and answer work emails on my phone, feeling simultaneously useful and useless in the particular way of someone who has shown up to help with something they can't actually assist with. By the time we're back home, it's nearly noon, and my mother is tired in the way that people get after first physical therapy sessions, where the body has been asked to do things it doesn't yet trust itself to do. I get her settled in her recliner, bring her ice water, and I'm in the middle of putting away the groceries when there's a knock at the front door. My father, who has apparently decided that his contribution to my mother's recovery is to be maximum underfoot, nearly trips over the coffee table getting to it. I hear voices in the hallway. And then, that scent again. Warm and complex and specific in a way that lands somewhere behind my sternum. Andrew Payne comes into the kitchen doorway holding a mason jar full of something red and gleaming. Tomato sauce, he says when he sees me. I made a batch yesterday. Your mom said she likes it on pasta. He's changed from the morning. Jeans now, a worn blue flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and the same barefooted quality about him even with actual shoes on. A looseness in how he holds himself that suggests he's genuinely comfortable in his own skin in a way that I find immediately, inexplicably irritating. That's very thoughtful, I say, in what I intend to be a polite, neutral tone. Andrew looks at me in that same assessing way from the morning. You can say it tastes like a gas station if it doesn't actually taste good. Your mom is too polite. My mother, who is absolutely within earshot and whose politeness has never once prevented her from telling anyone exactly what she thinks of their cooking, makes no sound from the living room. I'm sure it's great, I say. He sets the jar on the counter. She mentioned you might need someone to sit with her tomorrow afternoon while you take your dad to his doctor's appointment. I don't have anything scheduled. I can come over around 2. This is said simply without any particular offer of social investment. Not an invitation, not a question, just the straightforward logistics of a neighbor who has clearly already been integrated into my parents' support network in the months before I arrived. Which is, I acknowledge internally, genuinely kind, and I have no rational objection to. We'd appreciate that, I say. He nods, looks at me for one more moment, that quality of attention that is neither invasive nor indifferent, just present. Then he says, "See you tomorrow," and leaves. My father appears in the kitchen doorway, looking profoundly pleased about something he's pretending not to be pleased about. "Good kid, that one," he says. "He's probably our age, Dad." "Good person, then." He picks up the jar of tomato sauce and examines it with genuine approval. He fixed our fence post in March, wouldn't take anything for it. I put the last of the groceries away and don't say anything. I run in the mornings. It's another alpha habit, the need for early physical output, and I've learned to embrace it rather than fight it. Back in the city, I have a route through the park that I can do in my sleep. Here, I have to reconstruct something from memory, 6-year-old memory, which turns out to be surprisingly intact. I'm a mile and a half out when I round the corner of Whitmore and find Andrew Payne sitting on the bench at the edge of Clearview Park, reading. He has the book open flat on his knee, a cup of coffee in his other hand, the reusable kind, dented and stickered, and he looks up when I slow down because it would be bizarre not to acknowledge a neighbor I spoke to 12 hours ago. "You run," he observes. I'm mildly out of breath, which I resent. Apparently. He glances at the book in his hand, back at me. He doesn't close it, which I appreciate more than I expect to. The kind of people who close their book when someone stops to talk are performing attention. Andrew Payne doesn't seem to perform anything. "There's a decent route through the north end of the park," he says. "Loops back to Briar. About 3 miles total. The east path floods when it rains, so avoid that one." "Thanks." "Sure." Pause. He takes a sip of coffee. "What are you reading?" I ask. He tilts the cover toward me. It's a novel I recognize. One of those books that gets called quiet by reviewers who mean it as a compliment. I read it on a train 2 years ago and thought about it for a week afterward. "Good book," I say, and I mean it. Something shifts in his expression. The same ghost of a smile from yesterday, but fuller now, almost reaching his eyes. "Yeah." The middle section is slow, but the ending hits differently when you get there. "You've read it before?" Third time. He says it without any self-consciousness. Some books are worth coming back to. I stand there in my running clothes on the edge of a park at 6:45 in the morning, and I think, very clearly and against my best interests, I want to know what other books he comes back to. "I should finish my run," I say. "North Path," he says, and goes back to his book. I take the North Path. It is, as advertised, a good route. I make my father's doctor's appointment at 1, leave Andrew next door with my mother at 2, and spend 45 minutes in a waiting room listening to my father deny that his blood pressure has been elevated while the chart on the wall says otherwise. "I'll take the medication," he says to the doctor, in the tone of a man making a concession in a negotiation. "You'll take the medication as prescribed," the doctor says, in the tone of someone who has had this conversation before. That's what I said. In the car on the way home, my father is quiet for a mile or so. Then, "Your mother worries about me." "Your blood pressure is actually elevated, Dad. That's not worry, that's evidence." "I know." He watches the road. "I just don't like her having more to manage when she's already." He stops, tries again. "She's good at hiding it, but this surgery scared her, not just the recovery. The vulnerability of it. You know what I mean." I do know what he means. My mother is a woman who has spent her entire life being the most capable person in any room she enters. And the experience of being someone who needed to be cared for rather than caring is something she has not yet fully metabolized. "She's tough," I say. "She's scared," my father says. "And she doesn't want anyone to see that. So she makes lists and plans and calls you kids and organizes everything within an inch of its life." He pauses. "It helps, having Andrew next door. He doesn't make her feel like a patient." How does he make her feel? My father thinks about this. Like a person she likes spending time with. Like it's a choice, not an obligation. He glances at me. Some people are like that. Easy to be around, without effort. We pull into the driveway, and my father gets out of the car and goes in through the front door, and I sit for a moment in the parked car. When I come inside, I find my mother and Andrew at the kitchen table with a pot of tea between them and what appears to be an ongoing game of cards. My mother's reading glasses perched on her nose and an expression on her face that I haven't seen in a while, relaxed, present, genuinely amused. Andrew is saying something that I catch only the tail of, some story about a hiking trip that went sideways, and my mother is laughing the way she laughs when something actually lands, not politely but with her whole face. They both look up when I come in. "How's your father's blood pressure?" my mother asks. "He's taking the medication," I say. "Of course he is. I already made the appointment with the pharmacist." She picks up her cards. "Andrew's been teaching me gin rummy. I've beaten him twice." "You've won twice," Andrew says, with the careful precision of someone drawing a distinction. I haven't verified that they were wins under the established rules. "I was following your rules," my mother says, with great dignity. "You were following a version of them." I lean in the kitchen doorway and watch this exchange. The ease of it, the warmth of it. The way Andrew speaks to my mother like she's a sparring partner rather than a convalescing woman, and something in me shifts that I don't fully understand yet. "I'll start dinner," I say. "There's leftover pasta in the fridge," my mother says. "The sauce is from Andrew's jar." I go to the fridge. I am aware, with unnecessary clarity, of Andrew Payne getting up from the table, thanking my mother for the game, telling her he'll see her Thursday for the next round. I hear his voice moving toward the hallway, the front door, the end of his visit. I am stirring a pot of water on the stove when I hear my mother call from the kitchen. "Aaron, would you walk Andrew out?" I stop stirring. Walk him out, to the sidewalk, 10 feet away. "Mom?" "My knee hurts," she says without a shred of remorse. The evening air is cooler now, the sky having moved through that particular shade of deep amber that happens in the hour before full dark. Andrew and I stand on the front walk, and there is a moment where neither of us speaks, and it is not, somehow, uncomfortable. "She cheats at gin rummy," he says. "She absolutely does. I agree." He almost laughs. Not quite. It's something just short of a laugh, a compression of air, a shift in his expression. But it's there. I'm aware again of his scent, more present now in the cooler air. That warm cedar and clove complexity that my alpha instincts have been cataloging without my permission since yesterday morning. It does something inconvenient to my concentration. "Thank you," I say, "for sitting with her. You didn't have to. I know." His voice is calm, without the social performance of deflection. He's not going to tell me it was nothing, or his pleasure, or any of the phrases people use to minimize what they've actually done. He just accepts the thanks. It is, I realize, a very specific kind of confidence. "How long have you lived here?" I ask. 4 months, like your mom said." He tilts his head toward the blue colonial. "I grew up in a rented house about 3 miles east. The apartment I'd been in for 2 years got sold, and I was ready to put down something more permanent." A pause. "I like the street. Quiet. Oak trees." "It's a good street," I admit. He looks at me sidelong. "Your mom says you haven't been back in 2 years. 3 years. What's in the city?" The question is direct, without being pointed. Not, "Why did you leave?" Not an implicit judgment, just a genuine inquiry. "What is in the city?" "Work," I say. "My own space. A routine." I pause, because those things are true, but they're also the tidy version. I find it easier to be who I am. There. He doesn't push on this, he just nods. Makes sense. We stand there another moment. The light is almost gone now. Somewhere down the street a dog barks once and goes quiet. "I should let you get back inside," Andrew says. "Yeah." He starts toward his driveway, then pauses without turning around. "I'm making breakfast tomorrow. Enough for extra if you want to eat before your run." He walks up his driveway and into his house before I can answer. I stand on the front walk for a moment, looking at the closed door. Then I go back inside, where my mother is absolutely not pretending to be interested in her book. Good evening, Air? She asks. It's fine, I say. She turns a page. He's a very good cook, Mom. That's all I said. I go heat up the pasta. I tell myself I'm not going to knock on his door. I run the North Path route, the one he recommended, and the entire 3 miles, I tell myself very firmly that I have absolutely no reason to go over there, that it was probably a casual offer. That showing up would be strange, that I don't need to complicate a 7-day visit with the kind of personal investment that will make leaving harder. I am back on Briar Lane, 30 feet from Andrew's driveway, when the smell of bacon reaches me. Actual bacon. The real kind, not the turkey variety. And underneath it, coffee, and something sweet, maple maybe, or vanilla, drifting from the open kitchen window of the blue Colonial. I am only human. I change direction and knock on his door. He answers in 30 seconds, wearing a kitchen apron over his flannel shirt, and looks at me with the same unhurried assessment that appears to be his default expression. You came, he says, not triumphant about it, just noting the fact. You made bacon, I say. Among other things. He steps back to let me in. His kitchen is. I look around, taking it in without meaning to, organized in the specific way of someone who cooks seriously and has thought about function over form. Herbs growing in small pots on the windowsill, a magnetic knife strip above the counter, a cast iron pan on the stove that is clearly decades old and clearly beloved, cookbooks on a dedicated shelf beside the refrigerator, spines cracked from actual use. There's a small table near the window with 2 place settings already laid. I look at them. He follows my gaze. Your mom told me you run at 6. I figured the math. She's an operator, I say. She's lovely, he says without irony, taking the pan off the heat. I sit down at the table that he set before I confirmed I was coming, and Andrew Payne brings 2 plates of food, eggs that are perfect, bacon that is crisp without being burnt, toast with the kind of thick-cut bread that comes from an actual bakery, and sits across from me, and we eat. It is one of the best breakfasts I have had in at least a year, possibly longer. You're good at this, I say. Cooking is patience, he says, and attention, both of which I've had time to practice. What do you do for work? He takes a sip of coffee. I'm a freelance copy editor. Books, mostly, academic presses, some fiction houses. I work from home. A pause. It's why the flexible schedule. I organize my own hours. And you like it? Not a question, but he treats it like one. I like being alone with words. I like the puzzle of it, finding where a sentence is lying to you and helping it tell the truth. He looks at his coffee cup. It suits how my brain works. Which is how? He looks up at me. Those light eyes, and in the morning kitchen light I can see they're green. Not a simple green, but layered, the way good colors always are. Methodical, he says. Slow to conclusions. Better at listening than talking. You seem to be talking fine right now. You're asking questions that deserve answers. I put down my fork. There's something happening in this conversation that I need to name, at least to myself, which is that I am completely comfortable. Sitting in a stranger's kitchen. Not a stranger, a neighbor, a person I've known for approximately 36 hours, eating breakfast at 7 in the morning, and I am completely, entirely at ease in a way I haven't been in a very long time. That is not good news. You don't seem bothered by the alpha-omega thing, I say, because I have apparently decided that subtlety is overrated at 7 in the morning. Andrew looks at me for a moment. Then he reaches for the butter and applies it to his toast with the care of someone buying time. Should I be? Most omegas. I stop, reconsider. In my experience, there's usually a shift. When an alpha comes into a space. I know what you mean. He takes a bite of toast. I've met alphas who expected that. The accommodation. He says the word carefully, without bitterness, but with the precision that makes clear he's chosen it deliberately. I don't really do that. I noticed. Does it bother you? The question is genuine, not a challenge. He actually wants to know. No, I say, and mean it. It's actually, I search for the word, restful. Something in his face does something quiet, not the ghost of a smile this time, something steadier. Yeah, I know the feeling. We finish breakfast. He tells me about the tomato plants, which variety does best in partial shade, why he switched to heirloom seeds last spring, the particular satisfaction of eating something you grew yourself. I tell him about the city, the good parts, the neighborhood I live in, the bookshop near my apartment that I go to on Saturday mornings. You read, he says, constantly. What? What? Mostly literary fiction, some history, the occasional thriller when I need to turn my brain off. He nods slowly, as if adding this to some internal record. I have a shelf of things I keep meaning to reread. If you want anything while you're here. I brought 2 books, I say. Are they good ones? One of them is. He almost laughs again. That almost laugh that I'm starting to catalog with the same attention I've been giving to everything else about him. I should let you get to work, I say, standing. He stands too, and walks me to the door, and on the threshold he pauses with one hand on the door frame and looks at me with those green eyes, and there is a moment, brief quiet, fully present, where neither of us speaks, and the morning is a particular quality of warm. Same time tomorrow? He says. I should say no. If you're making that toast, I say, probably. He doesn't quite smile. But he comes the closest yet. I do not tell myself I won't go back the next morning. Apparently, I've already learned that lesson. I knock at 7005, and he opens the door at 7007, and there's coffee already poured, and we fall into it like it is something we've been doing for years instead of 3 days. The conversation is, it doesn't follow rules. We move from the book he's editing, A History of Cartographic Errors, which sounds tedious, but the way he describes it makes it sound like a detective story, to a memory I have of the park down the street summer when I was 12, and the way it connects to something Andrew says about growing up 3 miles east, and somehow we're talking about the experience of being an omega in a world that has very specific ideas about what that means. He talks about it without drama or grievance, just clear-eyed accounting. People assume things, he says. They assume you need things you don't, that you're available in ways you haven't offered. He turns his coffee cup slowly, that you'll shift to fill whatever space an alpha opens up. I'm sorry, I say, because I am. He looks at me. You don't do it. I try not to. I try not to. Most alphas don't try. There's silence for a moment. Does it ever bother you? I ask. The biological stuff. The pull, or whatever you want to call it, having it happen whether you want it to or not. Andrew considers this with the same slow, methodical care he seems to bring to everything. It used to, he says. When I was younger, I spent a lot of time trying to manage it, control what my body was doing when it wasn't asking for my input. He pauses. Now I think about it differently. The biology is one piece of information. It's not the whole answer. What is the whole answer? He looks out the window at the morning garden. I don't know yet. I'm still working it out. I sit with that, and the comfortable silence of 2 people who don't need to fill every quiet moment with noise. Why did you really leave? He asks. Not prying, just asking. The way he asks everything, like the question has actual weight, and he's holding it carefully. I look at my coffee. I was 22, I say slowly. And being here, being who I was here, felt like wearing a coat that didn't fit. I kept bumping into the edges of it. My father was very clear about what he thought an alpha son should do, should want, should be. He's not a bad man. I pause. He's just very sure about things. And I wasn't sure about any of it, so I left to figure that out somewhere I had room. Did you? Mostly, I say. Enough. He nods. You could have done it differently, he says. But maybe you needed the distance. I think I did, I say. I stop. What? I look up at him. I missed it. More than I let myself know, I think. This street. The oak tree. My mom's reading glasses. The way my dad does things with his hands when he doesn't know how to say something with his mouth. I exhale. I convinced myself that missing it was the same as needing it, and I couldn't afford to need it. Andrew is quiet for a moment. Then, those are different things. I know, I say. I know that now. We sit for another half hour. The sun moves. His coffee gets refilled. Mine doesn't because I already had too much. At some point he gets up and comes back with a book, a different one from the park bench, this one small and green, and sets it on the table between us without saying anything. I pick it up. It's a collection of essays about attention and perception and the practice of noticing things. Page 63, he says. I turn to page 63. Read the first paragraph. Then the second. By the third paragraph, I understand why he wanted me to read it. Yeah, I say. Yeah, he agrees. I take the book with me when I leave because he tells me to keep it. And I walk back next door with it under my arm and the feeling in my chest of something building that I do not know what to do with and that I am increasingly certain is not in fact. Going to wait politely for my 7 days to be over before demanding to be addressed. My mother catches me on the fourth morning. Not literally, she doesn't follow me to the door or appear in the driveway. She catches me in the more surgical way that is her particular specialty, which is that she says exactly one true thing at exactly the right moment and then doesn't pursue it. I come back from Andrew's kitchen at 8:15 earlier than usual because he has a deadline this week, and I'm not going to be the thing that pulls him from his work. And I come through the front door, and my mother is in the hallway adjusting her robe, and she looks at me with those sharp eyes and says, "You look the way you did when you were 17 and had just realized something important." I stop. She goes into the kitchen. "Scrambled or fried?" she calls. "I already ate," I say. Long pause. "Andrew's making you breakfast," she says. "Not a question. He's a good cook." The sound of a kettle being filled. "He makes excellent omelets. He made one for me last month when I had a bad knee day and couldn't stand long enough to cook." Another pause. "He stayed and did the crossword with me while I ate. Didn't try to do it for me, just sat there and thought it through with me." I lean in the kitchen doorway. "Mom, I'm making tea," she says innocently. "What are you doing?" She turns to look at me, and for a moment the performance drops. The studied casualness, the careful indirection. And she looks at me the way she did when I was a small boy and had come to her with something I couldn't name yet, that specific, tender directness. "I'm noticing that my son looks more like himself than he has in years," she says simply. "That's all. I don't have an answer for that." She turns back to the kettle. "He's a good person, Aaron," she says, quieter now. "The real kind. Not performed, good. Actually good. I know," I say. Because after 4 days of early mornings and breakfast conversations and sitting in his kitchen with books and coffee, I do know. The knowing is not the problem. The problem is that I have 3 days left. My father enlists me in the afternoon for what turns out to be a 4-hour project involving the basement storage reorganization that he's been planning for 6 months, and has apparently decided my return is the universe's sign that now is the time. I don't mind. It's physical, wordless, and it gives me something to do with my hands while my brain works through things I've been not quite thinking all week. We're organizing a shelf of old tools when my father says, without preamble, "You planning to stay in the city?" Not a question, a check-in. "That's the plan," I say. He nods. Picks up an old level, checks it, puts it back. "Good job there. Good life." He says it in the way he says most things, factual, without editorializing. "You happy?" I look at a wrench that used to belong to my grandfather. "I'm doing well." He makes a sound, non-committal. "Those aren't the same thing." I put the wrench back. "Dad!" "I know I wasn't easy when you were young," he says, still looking at the shelf. "I had ideas about things that—" He stops. Starts again, slowly, like a man handling something fragile. "I've had some time to reconsider some of those ideas." He looks at me. "You left because you needed space to figure yourself out. I understand that better now. I didn't then." His jaw works. "I'm sorry it took me this long." The basement is very quiet. "Dad," I say after a moment. "Don't make it a big thing," he says, gruff with feeling. "Just—" He picks up a box of old nails. "Help me figure out what we're keeping." "Okay," I say. "Yeah, okay." We work in silence for another hour and a half, and it is It is exactly the right thing. My father saying something important in the only language he's ever been fluent in, which is the language of being present and doing the work, and me receiving it in the same language. By the time we come upstairs, my mother has ordered takeout and Andrew is at the table. I stop in the kitchen doorway. He looks up and catches my expression, whatever it is, and there's a question in his face that he doesn't ask. I shake my head slightly. He nods slightly. And somehow, that small exchange contains more communication than I've managed with most people in years. We eat dinner, the four of us, and it is the most comfortable I have felt since arriving, and I am acutely, inescapably aware that in 56 hours, I'm getting on a train back to the city. After dinner, after my parents have settled in, Andrew and I end up on his back porch. Not by design exactly. I'd walked out to check on the garden my mother asked about, and he'd followed with 2 glasses of iced tea, and then we were simply there, sitting in the garden chairs as the evening deepened around us. The tomato plants are enormous. I can see why he's proud of them. You're thinking, he says. I'm usually thinking. Differently than usual. He looks at the garden. You've been off since you got home this evening. I turn my glass in my hands. My dad apologized to me today. In the basement, over a shelf of old tools. Andrew is quiet for a moment. For what? For. I try to find the right summary. For having a specific idea of who I was supposed to be when I was younger, and being inflexible about it. He didn't have the words for a lot of it, but I know what he meant. How does that feel? Like. I stop. Try again. Like picking up something you thought you'd have to leave behind, unexpectedly getting to keep it. Andrew sets his glass down on the arm of the chair and looks at me, and I look back. And in the dark of the garden with the fireflies starting up in the grass beyond the fence, there is something in the quality of attention between us that has shifted from what it was yesterday and the day before. And the morning in the kitchen, it has been building. I have been watching it build and telling myself it was one thing when it is clearly, at this particular moment, another. Andrew, I say. Yeah, he says. I leave Sunday. I know. That's 2 days. I know that too. His voice is steady, not cold, steady, the way he is about everything, that quality of not performing. I exhale. I don't know what to do with what this week has been. He's quiet for a moment. The garden around us does its evening things. Crickets starting, the last birds, the soft dark. What has it been? He asks. His voice is quieter now. Genuine question. And I know by now that when he asks something genuinely, he actually wants the answer and won't do anything uncomfortable with it. I look at him. The best week I've had in a long time, I say. And I don't know if that's... I search for the word. Circumstantial. The setting, the nostalgia, my parents, coming back to something I missed. Or if it's parching. I stop again. You, he says. Not a question, a possibility, offered. Yeah. Silence? I've been thinking about it too, Andrew says. He picks up his glass, puts it back down without drinking. I'm not, he thinks. I'm not good at fast. It's not how I work. I'd rather be slow and certain than fast and wrong. I know. But this week has been... He looks out at the tomato plants. I like talking to you. I like how you think. I like that you don't fill silence. He looks at me. Those are real things. That's not circumstance. My chest is doing the complicated thing again. Worse now. Fuller. 2 days, I say, for the 3rd time. 2 days is what we have, he agrees. I'm not going to pretend that's nothing. Neither am I say. We sit in the garden until the night is fully dark and the iced tea is gone and the fireflies have given up. And at some point, without my noticing, our chairs have moved closer together until his arm is against mine on the shared armrest, warm and real. I don't move away, neither does he. I don't run on the 5th morning. I knock on his door at 7, and he opens it in a gray t-shirt and bare feet and says, "No run today?" And I say, "No run today." And he steps back to let me in, and there's something in the air between us that is different from all the other mornings. Not tense, not charged exactly, just present in the way of something that has been named and will not unname itself. He makes coffee. I sit at the table. He sits across from me. For a while we're quiet. But it's not uncomfortable quiet. It's the quiet of two people who have learned in a very compressed amount of time that they don't need to perform ease with each other. "Tell me about your life," he says eventually. "The real version, not the tidy one." So I do. I tell him about the city apartment that I love for its small balcony and its proximity to the Saturday bookshop, and hate for its thin walls and the way loneliness has a different quality when you're surrounded by 8 million people. I tell him about the work. I'm an environmental consultant, projects that take me to sites around the country. Meaningful work that I am genuinely proud of, and that also means I'm somewhere else 6 months of the year and fully present nowhere. I tell him about the succession of almost relationships, the ones that were fine and then quietly not, the pattern I've noticed in myself of keeping one foot toward the door in case the coat doesn't fit again. He listens. Not performing listening, actually listening, in that way of his where his attention is complete and without agenda. When I finish, he says, "The coat thing. Yeah. Do you feel that here? This week?" I look at him across the small table in the morning kitchen. "No," I say, "not once." He absorbs this. His hands are wrapped around his coffee cup, and he's looking at me with those layered green eyes, and I am so aware of him, of the particular gravity he has. This quiet, patient person who waters his tomatoes at dawn and reads good books 3 times and listened to my mother laugh and told her she cheats at cards, that it has become something physical, an awareness in my chest and my hands and the base of my throat. "I want to show you something," he says. He takes me upstairs, the first time I've been past the kitchen, to a room at the back of the house that is clearly his study. Bookshelves floor to ceiling, a desk under the window with a good lamp, and on the wall, a large framed topographic map of a mountain range I don't immediately recognize. He points to a trail marked in red, weaving through the elevation lines. "I did this hike 2 years ago," he says. "Took 4 days. I went alone, which everyone told me was the wrong choice, but I needed to do it alone." He pauses, looking at the map. "On the 3rd day I was on a ridge and the weather changed, not dangerously, just dramatically. And there was this moment where the clouds came in so fast that the whole range disappeared. And it was just me in white gray, nothing, totally alone, and instead of being scared, I was at peace," I say. He turns to look at me. "Yeah, exactly that. I've had moments like that," I say. "At work, sometimes, on site. When everything else, the noise, the projections, the alpha instinct to push toward the next thing, just drops away and you're just present with the actual landscape." He's looking at me intently now. "How often do you feel that?" he asks. I look around the study, the books, the map, the good lamp, the evidence of a life built around attention. "Less than I should," I say honestly, "more this week than in the past year." He turns back to the map. "I've been thinking," he says carefully, "about what you said last night. The 2 days." A pause. "I don't want this to be something we pack away when you leave. My heart does something complicated. Andrew, I'm not asking for something I don't think we can have," he says, and his voice is measured, that methodical quality, thinking it through even as he speaks. "I'm just—" He turns to face me. "I'd rather be honest about what I want than be careful in a way that means I lose the chance to say it." "What do you want?" I ask quietly. He is quiet for a moment. "Then, I want to know how the next conversation goes, and the one after that." A pause. "I want to know what books you buy at that Saturday bookshop. I want—" He stops, exhales. "I want the 2 days we have, and I want to see what happens after that, if you're willing to find out." The room is very still. Everything in me that has been building toward something all week has arrived at this point, and it is not the complicated ache of nostalgia or the restless urgency of alpha instinct or any of the feelings I know how to manage and contain. It is something simpler and more profound than that, which is that I am standing in a room with a person who has offered me honesty without performance and patience without passivity. And I am 28 years old, and I am done being careful in ways that make me lose things. I cross the room. He holds very still, watching me come. And when I reach him, I stop with the few inches between us, and I look at him, and he looks at me. And I can see in his face that he already knows what I'm about to do, and he has already decided. Okay, I say. Okay, he asks. The 2 days. And after. He lets out a slow breath. I put my hand against his jaw, and he turns into it slightly, and I feel the warmth of his skin and a specific warmth of his presence, that cedar and clove thing that has been rewiring my brain all week. And I lean in and kiss him. It is not the kiss of two people who have just met. It is the kiss of two people who have been careful about something for 5 days and have arrived, finally, at the far side of that care. He kisses me back with the same quality he brings to everything, fully present, not hurried, certain. His hands come up to the front of my shirt, not pulling, just holding. And I feel, in the bones of the moment, the particular sensation of something clicking into place that has been out of alignment for a very long time. We pull back. His eyes, at this distance, are definitively green. Okay, he says. And now the almost smile is a real one, and it changes his whole face in a way that I am immediately and completely undone by. Yeah, I say. My voice is embarrassingly unsteady. He steps back, and I let him, and we stand in the study with the morning light coming through the window onto the topographic map, and he says, I have a deadline today. I know. But tonight, he looks at me. Tonight, I agree. I leave his house at 8:30 and walk next door with my heart doing something unreasonable in my chest, and I think, standing on my parents' front walk in the morning light, 5 days ago I had absolutely no part of this plan. My mother is asleep by 8. My father watches television in the sitting room until 9 and goes to bed at 9:15, with the routine precision of a man who has organized his life around the premise that a good night's sleep is a character virtue. I knock on Andrew's door at 9:30. He opens it, and he's changed from the morning, softer clothes, the sleeves of his shirt pushed up. And there's something in how he looks at me when he opens the door that is still new enough to be almost startling. Come in, he says. The house at night is different from the house in the morning. The kitchen light is lower, something instrumental playing from a speaker in the living room. Piano again, I realize. What I heard on the first night, and there are 2 glasses of something on the coffee table in the living room, and books open on various surfaces, like punctuation marks in someone's thinking. He pours wine. We sit on opposite ends of the couch, turn toward each other, and we talk. This is what I understand, by the 5th evening, about talking to Andrew Payne. It goes somewhere. Not all conversations go somewhere. Most of them circle or deflect, or run parallel, and never cross. Andrew asks questions that build on the last answer, and offers thoughts that invite the next one, and the conversations we've had this week have traveled farther, from beginning to wherever they end up, than most conversations I can remember. Tonight we talk about loneliness, not as complaint, not as confession, just as a fact of certain kinds of lives that we're both familiar with and have both made different peace with. We talk about what it feels like to be the kind of person who needs solitude to function, but who runs up against the paradox of that solitude. Eventually, the point where it tips from restorative to isolating. There's a difference, Andrew says, leaning against the couch arm with his wine, between being alone and being lonely. I'm good at being alone. I've built a life around it, deliberately. But loneliness, he pauses. Loneliness isn't about other people being absent. It's about the connection you're not making. Even in a crowd, I say. Even with someone in the same room. He looks at his glass. I've been lonely with people. Less lonely alone. Until recently, he looks at me. Until recently. The couch has gotten smaller while we weren't paying attention. Or we've gotten closer. Both, probably. His knee is against mine, and neither of us has moved away. And the lamp on the end table makes everything warm and small and specific to this room, this evening, this person. I'm scared, I say, because this is the 5th evening, and I've learned that Andrew Payne handles honesty better than anything else, and I've learned that I want to give him that. Of what specifically? He asks. Sunday, I say. Getting on the train, going back, all of this. I gesture, meaning, The week, the mornings, the kitchen, the study, this couch, everything. Becoming a thing I had once. He's quiet for a moment. It's a real fear, he says. I know. I have it too, different version. He looks at me steadily. What would it take to not have it stay a thing you had once? For it to be something we're having, I say. Present tense, ongoing. Logistics, he says, thinking out loud. You travel for work. I work from home. I don't require physical proximity every day. I'm good at distance, as a rule. He pauses. I'm not saying distance doesn't cost anything. I'm saying I know how to hold things that aren't physically in front of me. I'm in the city about half the year. Half the year is not nothing. No, I say, it's not. He turns his glass slowly. I'd need you to. He stops, starts over, choosing words with care. When you're gone, I need to know it's not out of sight, out of mind. I need to know you'll call when you say you'll call. He looks at me, not as a rule, as a reality, because that's how you show up for someone when you're not physically present. I can do that, I say. I believe you, he says. But I need you to know it before Sunday, so that Sunday isn't the end of the conversation. It's not, I say. I think about what he said in the study that morning, about wanting to know how the next conversation goes. It's the middle of it. He looks at me for a long moment with those green eyes and that steady, unhurried quality. Okay, he says. Okay, I say. And then I close the distance between us because there is no longer any reason not to. And this time, the kiss is slower and more thorough, and I feel his hand come up to my hair and I feel the warmth of him all along the side of me, and it is not a managed. Careful thing, it is the thing itself. We stay on that couch for a long time. When I finally leave, because I have to, because my parents' house is next door, and I am nominally their caretaker this week. The night has gone deep and quiet, and the street is entirely still. Andrew stands in the doorway with the lamplight behind him, and I stand at the edge of his porch and we look at each other across the small distance. Tomorrow morning, he says. Tomorrow morning, I agree. I walk the 20 feet between houses, with my heart already full of Sunday and already full of the conversation that will come after it, and I understand something that I haven't let myself understand in years, which is that caring about something, really caring the kind that moves in you and has weight and doesn't fit neatly away, is not the same as being trapped by it. I stand on the porch for a moment before going in, looking up at the oak tree my father planted in the year I was born. It's enormous now. Some things are worth coming back to. On the 6th day, I take my mother to physical therapy in the morning, help my father level the bathroom, grab bars to his exacting standards, make lunch for 3, and spend the afternoon reading on the back porch. Andrew is in his garden in the late afternoon, and we don't have a long conversation. Just a brief exchange over the fence about the tomato plants, which have a situation with the specific pest he's dealing with organically. And about the book I finished that morning, which he says he read 3 years ago and wants to discuss properly later, and about dinner. Come over, I say. I'll cook. He looks at me. You cook? Don't sound shocked. Your mother said you burned water in college. I stare. She told you that? She tells me a lot of things about you. He goes back to his plants. I've been getting your biography in installments for 4 months. I'm going to talk to her. She's very proud of you, he says, without looking up. She says it every way except directly. I stand at the fence for a moment, looking at him. 7 o'clock, I say. I'll bring wine, he says. My mother, when I come back inside, is reading her book with great serenity. I know what you did, I tell her. I don't know what you're talking about, she says, turning a page. 4 months of installments, Mom. She looks up at me over her reading glasses. He needed to know you were worth talking to, she says. I was merely providing evidence. There's nothing I can say to this that wouldn't prove her point, so I go to make dinner instead. I make a pasta dish, not the tomato sauce one, a different one, something with lemon and capers and crispy breadcrumbs that I learned from a recipe I've made enough times to know by feel. Andrew arrives at 7 with a bottle of wine and the good manners to say the right things to my parents before dinner, and the easy presence to make it feel natural rather than performed. We eat, again, the 4 of us, And it is even easier than the first time because something has shifted in the house this week that I didn't expect to shift. My father talks more than he usually does at dinner. About his workshop, about a project he's been planning, about a documentary series he and my mother have been watching together in the evenings. My mother adds commentary and asks Andrew questions, and there is around the table the texture of a family dinner in the fullest sense, which includes the person from next door who has become part of the fabric of these people's ordinary life. After dinner, Andrew helps clear the table without being asked, which I notice my father noticing. My parents go to bed at their usual times, and Andrew and I sit up in the kitchen until midnight, and we talk, and we don't talk in equal measure, and at some point he shows me something on his phone, a trail map, a different mountain range, a route he's been thinking about for next spring, and I find myself leaning in to look at it with my shoulder against his, and he shifts to accommodate me so naturally that it happens without comment. And this is, I think, the truest thing about this week. How naturally it has all happened. Not without effort, not without care, but naturally, the way things grow when the conditions are right, not forced into shape, but given room. He leaves at midnight, and I walk him to the door, and we stand in the doorway in the old familiar way of this week, the threshold of his house and me on one side of it. And he puts his hand against my jaw, the way I put mine against his yesterday morning, and I lean into it. "Tomorrow's your last full day," he says. "I know." "I'm not going to spend it being sad about Sunday," he says, clearly and directly. "Neither am I say. "Good." He drops his hand. "Breakfast at 7. I'm making omelets." "With the tomatoes?" "Obviously, with the tomatoes." The last full day arrives with the particular quality of last things. Bright and detailed and freighted with attention in the way that ordinary things only become when you know they're ending. I run my route through the park. I note the specific quality of light through the oak canopy on the north path. I think about the bench at the park's edge which I can see from the path and whether Andrew will be there with his book, but he isn't this morning. And I understand without asking that he's saving his morning for the omelets, which are, as advertised, exceptional. He uses the tomatoes. They're exactly right. We eat without rushing and talk about the things we haven't yet talked about. His family, which is smaller than mine, and farther away, mine which I am. I realize as I describe it, thinking about differently than I was a week ago. He tells me about the first book he edited professionally, a poetry collection, and how he cried reading the final manuscript because it was that good. I tell him about the first significant environmental project I worked on, an estuary restoration in the north, and how I stood in the restored wetland 3 years after the project ended and watched birds arrive that hadn't been there in decades. "That sounds like the Ridge moment," he says. "Exactly like the Ridge moment," I agree. "You should go back sometime," he says. "I was thinking about it this week," I say. "I was thinking I want to show you." He looks at me across the table. "Okay," he says, quiet and certain. After breakfast, we spend the morning side by side on his back porch with books, and it is, I note this catalog it, want to be able to return to it. One of the best mornings I can remember. Two people who like books and quiet and each other's company, just being in the same space while the morning does its thing around them. He reads, I read. Occasionally one of us says something. A line from our respective books, a thought, a question. Occasionally we're quiet for 45 minutes at a stretch. I finished the essay collection he gave me on the third day. The last essay is about paying attention as a practice of love. I look up from the last page and Andrew is watching me. Good ending? He asks. Really good ending, I say. In the afternoon, I spend time with my parents, my mother's exercises, my father's workshop project, the ordinary tasks of care that brought me here. And there is something different about doing these things on the seventh day than the first. I am not braced against missing this, not holding it at arm's length. I am just here, present in it, in the ordinary fact of these people who are mine. My mother, at some point, reaches out and takes my hand. She doesn't say anything. She just holds it for a moment, this woman who raised me and knows me in every version I've ever been, and then lets go and goes back to her book. I sit with that for a long time. I have an early train. The cab comes at 9:15, which means I'm up at 7 and everything has to be done before that. Breakfast with my parents, the last of the organizing. The careful packing of the one rolling suitcase I brought exactly 7 days ago. Andrew knocks at 7:45. My mother lets him in, and he comes to the kitchen where I'm washing the last breakfast dishes, and he doesn't say good morning. He just comes to stand next to me at the sink and leans against the counter and watches me wash a coffee cup. "You're not going to help?" I say. "I helped every other morning," he says. "Fair." I wash the cup. I put it in the drying rack. I stand there with my hands in the soapy water for a moment, looking out the window at the driveway where the cab will come, and Andrew is next to me, solid and real and smelling like cedar and morning. And I turn off the water and dry my hands and turn to face him. "So," I say. "So," he says. His eyes are very green in the morning light. His expression is the one I've come to know. Calm, present, not performing anything. "I meant what I said," I tell him. "Everything I said." "I know," he says. "I meant mine too." I reach out and take his hand, and he lets me, his fingers closing around mine with steady warmth. "I'm going to call you tonight," I say, "when I get in." "I'll be home," he says. "I'm going to want to talk about the book you're editing." "The cartography one." "The cartography one. I'll have notes," he says. His voice is quieter now. "I'll want to hear about your Saturday bookshop." "I'll go this week," I say. "I'll describe everything I bought." "Okay." He squeezes my hand once. "Come back when you can." "Before fall," I say. "I have a project in August that will take me east. I can route through here." "August," he says, and the word lands between us like something we're both already planning around. I lean in and kiss him. Not a farewell kiss, not a last thing, but the kind of kiss that is already reaching toward the next one, that contains within it the intention of more. He kisses me back the same way. When we separate, his forehead rests against mine for a moment. "Go take care of yourself," he says. "You too," I say. "Water the tomatoes." "They're very demanding," he agrees. My father appears in the kitchen doorway with impeccable timing, carrying my suitcase. He looks at us with the expression of a man who is going to pretend he doesn't see anything while clearly and thoroughly seeing everything. "Cabin 20, he says. "Thanks, Dad." He retreats, managing somehow to make his retreat look completely dignified. Andrew releases my hand and steps back, and I look at him one more time. This person who was not any part of my plan, who has rewritten the week entirely, who has given me things I didn't know I was missing and made the returning feel different from how I feared it would. "Next conversation," I say. "Tonight," he says, "when you get in." When I get in, he walks me to the door. The train pulls out of the station at 9:42, and I have a window seat, which I requested. And the landscape changes in that way it does when you're leaving a place that has done something to you. The familiar streets giving way to roads you don't know. The streets giving way to highway. The highway giving way to the long, regular passing of distance. I look at my hands. I have, in my bag, the essay collection from Andrew's shelf, which he told me to keep. 2 books I bought before the trip, one of which is good. My phone, which has a text from Andrew that came in at 9:50 that says simply, "Safe travels." The tomatoes are fine. I look out the window at the moving landscape. I have, in the past 7 days, helped my parents in the real and ordinary ways that helping requires. Made peace with my father over a shelf of old tools. Understood something new about my mother's fear and her strength. Eaten in this kitchen, slept in this bedroom, stood under this oak tree, come back to a place I thought I'd made my peace with leaving, and found that peace more complicated than I knew. And I have met Andrew Payne, who lives next door, who was not any part of the plan, who watered his tomatoes barefoot in the early morning light, who read the same book 3 times because some books are worth coming back to, who told me what he wanted clearly and without performance, and listened to what I wanted with complete attention, and offered me exactly the kind of honesty that I have spent years being too careful to ask for. I pick up my phone. 7 days, 1 week. Everything I thought I was going back to is waiting for me. The apartment, the work, the Saturday bookshop, the life I built in the city that is mine and real and good. And that hasn't changed, it's still there. But it's larger than it was when I left, because there is now a voice I'll hear tonight. A person who will want to know about the train ride, about the view from the window, about what book I'm reading. There are tomatoes growing in a garden on Briar Lane, dramatic about direct sun, tended by careful hands. There is an August taking shape. A trail map on a wall, a study full of books, a kitchen with a cast iron pan and herbs on the windowsill. There is the full green of Andrew Payne's eyes in the morning light on the last morning. My phone lights up with another message, a photo. The tomato plants, this morning, clearly thriving, with a single cherry tomato visible at the bottom of the frame that wasn't red enough to pick when I left. He sends a second message, it'll be ready by August. I sit with that for a moment, looking at a photograph of a tomato plant growing in a garden I'll be back to see. Then I type, then I'll be there to eat it. I put my phone away. I look out the window at the distance unspooling, and I think about the essay collection in my bag, the last essay, the one about attention as a practice of love. I think about standing in a restored estuary watching birds arrive that hadn't been there in decades. I think about an oak tree that keeps growing. Some things, I understand this now, more fully than I have before. Some things are worth the risk of caring about, not because they're safe, not because you know how they'll end, but because the alternative, the careful managed half-life of keeping one foot toward the door, costs more than you can afford to keep paying. 7 days was not the plan. It was better than anything I planned. And on Briar Lane in the blue colonial with the window boxes and the amber porch light. An Omega I didn't know 6 days ago is back at his desk with his notes and his coffee and his cast iron pan editing someone else's sentences back to truth. And tonight, when I get in, when the train pulls into the station and I carry my suitcase up to the apartment and the city does its city things all around me, I will call him, and the conversation will continue. It is already continuing. If you made it to the end, you're my kind of person. Leave a subscribe, comment down your favorite part of the story, and if you want early access to videos, exclusive content, or just want to support the channel, make sure to join our Patreon. Link is in the description. Even one member genuinely means the world to me. See you in the next one.